Hi guys, welcome back to my kitchen. In today's video, I'm going to share with you some meals we have had over the past couple weeks. I often get requests to see what and how we cook with what I preserve from our small homestead, so that's what I'm sharing today. First up, I made a beef and white bean stew. I love slow cooking stews or roasts because they're hearty, they are the ultimate comfort food, and this was the perfect meal for some cooler weather that we've had. This was the result of just grabbing a bunch of random ingredients out of the freezer and our canning pantry, and it turned out so good. I absolutely will be repeating this. So I started out by heating a Dutch oven over medium heat and got some fat melted in there. Today I did some lard from the pigs that we raised last year. And then I added in a couple pounds of stew meat. Today I did beef, but you could really do whatever you like. I just seasoned this really well with some salt and pepper and then seared all sides of the stew meat until it was nice and browned to help develop some good flavor. Next, I added in some garlic and some onion, as well as some diced celery and cabbage that I had frozen from the garden last year, and let that saute a bit. This utilized a ton of what I either canned or froze from last year's garden harvest. To that, I added in a splash of balsamic vinegar. Usually I would also add some red wine, but I didn't have any on hand. I also added a pint jar of some home canned tomato sauce, a quart of chicken bone broth, and then a pint of drained and rinsed white beans. I also added some fresh thyme from the garden. This is a lemon thyme and it is my absolute favorite. Brought that up to a low boil, then reduced it down to a simmer, and I covered the Dutch oven and let that hang out for a few hours over low heat to let the stew meat get nice and tender. I also added a pint of canned carrots to this, but I just stirred those in at the end to avoid them getting too mushy. Canned carrots, I can't say are my favorite thing flavor-wise, but they are really convenient to have on the pantry shelf for a quick side dish and a good way for us to store up some of what we grow without taking up too much freezer space. So that's something that I'll just continue to do, even though they aren't our absolute favorite. I love making a big batch of stew or soup like this for us to eat off for several days, and this was exactly that. Usually I would do potatoes in something like this, but the white beans were a really nice change. Tacos with homemade corn tortillas are a favorite of mine. Yes, it takes more effort to make homemade tortillas, but really not that much. They are so simple to make, and I find they've got a way better flavor and texture than store-bought. I find that most store-bought options either are not overly soft or they fall apart really quickly. So for the corn tortillas, all you need is a few ingredients: some masa harina, some salt, and some warm water. So for the tortillas, I do 2 cups of masa harina, 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt, and then usually 1.5 cups of warm water. Sometimes I find I need just a little bit more than that. Once that's all mixed together, I set the dough aside with a wet cloth over top so the dough does not dry out, and I'll let that just sit to the side while I get a cast iron skillet heated. Homemade tortillas for me are kind of like pancakes in the sense that the first one or two in the batch never turns out perfectly. I usually end up over pressing that first tortilla and have it kind of fall apart on me. So I use a tortilla press lined with parchment paper. I really do think that a tortilla press is worth it compared to just rolling out the dough with a rolling pin. And I am not somebody that loves having a lot of kitchen gadgets. I use a 2 tablespoon scoop to portion the dough, and a batch of these usually makes about 16 for me. I add just a little bit of lard to my cast iron skillet and then cook the tortillas maybe about 45 seconds per side until they are cooked through. I went with pork tacos today to use up a couple of our pork steaks. I seasoned them really liberally with some salt, pepper, paprika, garlic powder, and some parsley, and then cooked those up in a hot cast iron skillet. While those were cooking, I made a spicy crema to go on top of the tacos, and I did just a mix of some homemade mayonnaise and Greek yogurt as well, and then plenty of this fermented sriracha. This is something that I'd really like to do this year once we have peppers coming in from the garden, so if you've made a fermented sriracha before, Please do share in the comments down below. I would love to hear your results with it and if you have a good recipe. I sliced the pork steaks and topped the tacos with some home-canned pickled coleslaw, as well as my favorite peach salsa, which will forever be a staple in our pantry, and then some of that spicy crema. We really do not have a whole lot coming out of the garden just yet, but we do have rhubarb. So we are getting lots of use out of it, and I need to get to preserving some of it. That is on my to-do list this week. So I made up a batch of these rhubarb muffins, and they turned out so great. I'm definitely going to freeze more rhubarb this year, so I have it on hand to make these year-round. I started by getting some butter melting and mixed together some Greek yogurt, some vanilla extract, eggs, and then the melted butter. This is a one bowl recipe because the less dishes, the better. I then whisked in some sugar, baking powder, some salt and cinnamon, and then added in the oat flour. Oat flour is my preference when it comes to most gluten-free baking. Then I stirred in all of that diced rhubarb, and I also mixed together a bit of cane sugar and some cinnamon to sprinkle over top, and then filled my muffin pans. As always, I'll have the full recipes down in the description box below. A staple meal for us is frittata because they are quick, they are packed with protein, and we rarely have a shortage of eggs around here, so they are something that we do quite a lot of year-round. For this morning's frittata, I chopped up plenty of garlic as well as some green onion. Frittatas are a really great way to use up any random veggies you've got in the fridge, which is usually what I end up doing, but today I used some bruschetta that I had canned in this, and that is something that I will definitely be doing again. I sauteed the garlic in some butter in a cast iron skillet, added in the green onion and the bruschetta, and let that cook just a little bit, and then I topped that off with some whisked eggs. This is really flexible, it's not really much of a recipe, but today I did 8 eggs. Pour the eggs into the hot skillet, and I let that just start to cook. I topped this off with some Parmesan cheese and then transfer that to the oven for maybe about 5 minutes at 350 until the eggs are just set. You want to make sure not to overcook them. Since we raise our own meat birds, we cook a lot of whole chickens. I don't part out a ton of them, so whole chickens is something that we do much more often versus specific cuts. One of my favorite ways to cook a whole chicken, unless I'm going to just roast it really simply, is this chicken in milk recipe from Jamie Oliver. I'll leave this in the description box down below. I know this sounds really bizarre. I was quite skeptical before I tried it for the first time, but it is so flavorful. So I am just loosely following this recipe. I started out by heating a Dutch oven over medium heat with a bit of butter, then transferred the whole chicken in there to sear on all sides to get it nice and brown. I seasoned that with some salt and pepper, and once that was nice and golden, I added in a couple cups of milk, a cinnamon stick. Again, I know this might sound a little bit odd. Cinnamon and chicken is not something that I usually think of paired together, but you've just got to trust me on this. Plenty of fresh whole cloves of garlic. Sometimes I'll also do fresh herbs, but I just did some dried parsley today, and then plenty of lemon zest as well. Cover the Dutch oven with a lid, and then that cooked at 375 for about 45 minutes covered and then 30 minutes uncovered. Now, once it comes out of the oven, reserve that milky broth. Do not let it go to waste, and I like to cook rice in it. It just adds so much flavor. It's lightly spiced and citrusy, and it just turns out so great. We had this with some more canned carrots tonight. I'm really trying to get through what we have on our pantry shelf. The best way that I've found to cook canned veggies is in a cast iron skillet really quickly over medium heat, just to heat them through. That way they don't become too mushy. I'd like to try preserving more carrots just by storing in the fridge, so if that's something that you have experience with for longer term storage, I'd love to hear from you in the comments down below, your experience with that and how you go about it. I hope this video gave you some meal inspiration and ways to use up some of what you may have preserved. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.